I got into an argument with one of my friends on the playground and said, screw this, I'm not working with people because people are awful. And so then I was like, well, I'm going to work with animals instead. And I stuck with it.
You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Downloadable audio episodes can be found on the podcast link, found at drawincustomers.com. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie, and today we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Kat and Lisa of ACES Veterinary. So Kat and Lisa, how is it going today?
Good.
Pretty
Going
good.
well. Sweet.
A little bit tired, but we're good. We're here.
Let's start out with foundation. Tell us what ACES is.
So ACES, or Animal Center for Emergency and Specialty, is a brand new after-hours urgent care in the Madison area. We also have oncology during the week, but our primary focus and where it was born from was extending the reach and availability of care for sick or injured pets.
All right. Does ACES stand for something? It's an acronym, right?
Yep.
All right.
So
Our full name is Animal Center for Emergency and Specialty. ACES for short.
All right.
so
So let's start there. How did you come up with the name?
Oh, that was a long process.
4 letters and it took so long.
Yeah.
we found the acronym first, and then we fit the words to it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
So-
we wanted to have a name that you could say, like a shortened name that you could say, versus just like a few letters that you had to spell out.
Okay.
Yeah. So we came up with a list. We went through things like Nova or I don't even remember. Nova's the one I remember off the top of my head. But yeah, and then we stuck with ACES. Like, nope, that's it.
Yep.
Okay, how do we make it work?
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it worked out well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell me, how do you two know each other? I mean, you own a business together now, but I imagine it wasn't born that way, right?
Yeah, we worked at the same company. We started back in 2020, so right in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh, perfect time.
Yep.
Everybody's getting pets.
Yeah.
Exactly.
As brand new graduate doctors.
Yes.
So we graduated and then started working together.
Oh, interesting.
So,
okay.
Yeah, and I had been working there for a few years as an assistant prior, and then became a doctor and kept working for them. But they pulled Kat from Washington to come work for us.
So
Yeah.
I came about 2,000 miles after
Wow.
school for.
Just to work with Lisa.
Yes, absolutely.
We didn't know it, but
Yeah,
that's what that was for.
How did they find you?
So I actually came over. So my husband is a air quality permitting engineer with the state DNR, and he graduated a little bit before I did. So he knew he wanted to work in public, sector of engineering instead of private. But so I was like, all right, you pick a job, and I will follow you, because I don't think at that time I was like, I don't think there's a clinic that's going to turn down a doctor.
No, right,
so
right.
he ended up out here, and I followed, and I was like, all right, well, here's where we're going to go. So
Nice. Okay. All right. Let's start with you, Lisa. How did you decide you were going to be a veterinarian?
Well, that was a little. I didn't know from the start I was going to be a veterinarian. Like some people say, like, oh, I knew back in elementary school I was going to be a veterinarian. I took a long path of following my best friend in middle school. Anything she wanted to be, I wanted to be.
Oh, okay.
So it probably started as lawyer first. Then I can't remember what came after that. At some point it was meat scientist.
You said meat
Yes,
scientist?
and that's what she actually is today. Yeah, but there was a point at which she wanted to be a veterinarian, so I did too, and just never strayed away from that. All through high school, I took veterinary science courses and animal science courses and shadowed veterinarians, and from that point, I pretty well knew that's what I wanted to do. In undergraduate school, I explored a lot of different pathways. College has a way of making you think about things like that, about all the different things that you can do with an animal science degree. And then probably like junior or senior year in college, I very much so knew that veterinarian was the path for me. So
All right.
I didn't know right from the start. It had to come on for a while.
You said junior or senior year of college.
Yeah.
That's when oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there other paths you were pursuing?
Yes, not super seriously.
Okay.
There was a point at which I took a course for equine breeding, and that was really cool. But I think kind of through that course and through the other classes that I took, veterinary medicine really stood out.
All right.
So yeah, there were some other pathways that I was exploring, but not as seriously as vet medicine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a story just for me and the people at home that may not necessarily know. How long do you have to go to school to be a veterinarian doctor?
Yeah. So you do have to do undergraduate school. You don't actually have to graduate with a degree from undergraduate, though.
You just have to hit a certain number of classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Typically, the minimum ends up being about 7 years.
All right.
Yeah.
For there, and that's
Usually at least 3 years of undergrad and then a full 4 years of veterinary school.
there's no way to shortcut that one.
Yeah.
And with the veterinary school, are you focused on feline or canine?
It depends
or
on the
equine
school.
Okay.
So the school I went to, Washington State, is what's called a non-tracking program.
Okay.
And so you learn small animal, large animal, you can learn
Parrots?
exotics, things like that all if you want
Okay.
to. You're tested on everything. You're required to know everything.
Okay.
Some schools, I think Texas A&M is one of them. I think one of the ones in Florida is one of them. They're called tracking schools. And so I think most of those ones, your first years, are still kind of all together. And then you decide, am I going to be a small animal? Am I going to large animal? And then all of your courses are focused on that based
right.
off of there. Great for people that know exactly what it is that they want to go into, because I have several classmates that are like, I'm here because, I'm in a small town, I've got family farms, things like that, and I'm specifically wanting to go back and help that community for them. But some people are just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Or they get in there and they change their minds and things like that for them. And so, if they get stuck into a tracking side of things of, could that be detrimental to them?
All right.
I don't have experience with that, but,
right.
I can see feasibly how that would happen.
Sure.
I mean, I'll say I went into veterinary school planning to be production medicine.
Yeah.
So that would have been a poor choice for me to go to a tracking school.
Help me with that. What is production medicine?
It's the
Dairy,
better way to say
beef.
like farm animal medicine,
Oh.
anything that produces food or other animals.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so funny. I was thinking like you're making medication, but no,
Yeah.
it makes sense. Okay,
Yep.
production. So they're machinery essentially. They just make the milk.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
And you were headed that way. Why?
I grew up in a small
Yeah.
town, and so I grew up with farms all around me, and I really enjoyed working with some of my neighbors as far as they had cows, they had some of them had sheep, goats. I kind of enjoyed that side of things, and
All right.
I just learned that I enjoyed dogs and cats more through veterinary school.
Okay.
Yeah, which
Is
is
this nicer, or what's the cuddlier?
not necessarily. I mean, people in large animal medicine, it can be a lot of work, and there can be a lot less return on investment. I truly learned that I specifically loved emergency medicine for dogs and cats.
Okay.
So that's really what I started tracking as far as like my junior and senior year of veterinary school, specifically like learning emergency medicine.
No, tell me about the production side of that being, I guess, not as profitable. Is that because they're looking at profit and loss more or less as a business? Like, should we make this animal, this cow, better because it's going to produce versus a dog is more emotional?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I also have a background in production. I worked on a dairy farm for quite a few years. But yeah, so some of it is, okay, is it worth, trying to fix this animal and get her back to, where she needs to be productive or things like that versus, is it going to be, more cost effective to just let her go and not put it in there. But it's also, these are farm productions, they just have a lower, not income like availability, cash flow for it, but there's just less.
It's still a farm.
There is
Yeah,
a
it's
little
still
less
a
money.
farm. It's
Yeah.
a little not lower income or anything like that. It's just there's
Well, I
just
understand
less
what you-
available.
Yeah, I understand what
to
you're
them.
saying.
Yeah.
Farmers, it's hard work,
Yeah.
but not necessarily as lucrative as a stock trader or something like
Yeah.
that, or a good stock trader maybe.
But-
So I get it. That makes sense. So let's start or continue with you, Kat.
Yeah.
What made you decide to get into the veterinary world?
So I'm exact opposite. I figured it out in kindergarten.
Oh wow! Okay.
So before that, I initially wanted to be a human doctor for that, and then I have a very
When you
distinct...
say initially, you're talking 4 years old or something?
Yes. I got into an argument with one of my friends on the playground and said, screw this, I'm not working with people because people are awful. And so then I was like, well, I'm going to work with animals instead. And I stuck with it.
Wow, okay.
For there. And I actually had family, you know, saying things like trying to convince me to like look at other things or things like that. And I just never found anything that kept my attention the same.
All right. Why would they try to convince you to go outside of veterinary?
There's at least where I was, and I don't know if it's pervasive around everywhere, things like that, there's a lot of, I don't know that stigma is the right word, but it's the word I'm going to use, about the cost of it. You know, work-life balance is the big, you know, keywords right now.
Cost of school or cost of the care itself?
Both. So cost of school it's notoriously high for not a lot of, you know, revenue, smaller paychecks and things like that compared to equivalent in human medicine. And so there's a lot of that of just like, you know, you're not going to make a lot of this. There's a lot of, you know, other things that can go in there. If you're in production medicine, I have things that you're on call all the time, you know, things like that too. And so there's a lot of that in there, but I think also too, a lot of it was just, let's just make sure you're not excluding all options. Was a lot of it too.
You're only in first grade.
Yeah,
That's
you know, so it's like all through high
things.
school of like, are you sure you want to commit to this? Because there's other things out there, and nothing just ever held my attention.
All right.
My biggest struggle was figuring out what focus I wanted to have
Okay.
in medicine. So I initially, for the longest time before I got into school, was I'm going to be in zoo medicine. I'm going to work in, you know, I think my goal was to work at the San Diego Zoo for the longest time.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and it's, you know, exotics, wildlife, conservation, that still has a large piece of my heart, but there's a lot that goes into it. And in our first year, one of our first classes was, we had like a planning thing of like, okay, what's your goal? And, you know, look into it and create this like, you know, 5-year plan of how are you going to get there? And so one of the first things I did was, well, what's the job availability? And so I went on to the AZA, the American Zoo Association job postings, and there were a grand total of 3 job postings for the entire North American continent.
Wow. Right.
And they all required a minimum of 3 years exotic medicine experience, which would require doing a residency and things like that. So I was like, well, maybe not realistic for me. I'm just in terms of the competitive side of the market.
Yeah.
And so then I started looking at other things, thought about production for a little while when I was working on the farm, and then fell into emergency medicine by accident.
All right.
For there. But then, yeah, very much cleared
Just because that's needed?
Well, because it's needed, and also there was, you know, so, you know, doing summer internships and things like that. There was one internship that I did where I hated every minute of it except for 3 cases.
Oh.
All of whom were respiratory distress cases.
Okay.
And so, you know, pets that can't breathe for one reason or another. One of them, you know, like there was, you know, really bad pneumonia. There was, you know, fluid in the chest, things like that. Only one of them had a happy ending for that, but they were the most entertaining cases of my summer.
Okay.
And so I still remember all 3 of them to this day. And I was like, well, maybe that's something I need to look into a little bit more.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then you 2 meet on the job, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And who suggested, hey, let's get out of here and start a business?
I don't know.
I don't remember who instigated that.
Yeah.
But I know there was just a specific moment where we both realized that where we were currently at in life and in our work, we just realized that there was a need that we needed to fulfill. Yeah. Both a need for more service for the pets in the community, and then also to change how we treated the staff, essentially. So we wanted to work on those 2 aspects,
Okay.
the pets and the staff.
Yeah.
Tell me about the staff side a little bit.
Yeah, so staff side of things is, well, I think both of them kind of stem from a very similar place, and I think we have a unique perspective on it of, like many things in the world probably today, it all comes down to COVID. And so we both started yeah, right. We've started our professional careers peak pandemic for that, which was a novel experience. But so we got to see things of very briefly of how they were getting, how things were beforehand, but seeing things ramp up, seeing the caseloads ramp up, seeing the hours come up, the stress that took on, people in interpersonal relationships, and that despite, the requirements, the emotional toll, the physical tolls being increased, the compensation side of things wasn't matching it. And so, we were frequently closing, people were calling out, some clinics are now closed permanently, hours are shifted, things like that. And there were a lot of people that were leaving veterinary medicine for, customer service or retail jobs and things like that because it paid the same.
Okay.
So something that is less demanding, less taxing, less schooling and things like that, and they're able to make the same wage as they were in veterinary medicine.
So tell me a little bit about that, just from the business side. Were they not being paid more because they couldn't be, or because owners of the businesses were hoarding, or what is the assumption there?
I don't know that there's one consistent answer to it. I think most people will tell you or feel like that their pay descended from business decisions, but I don't know that we have the knowledge or perspective to say one way or the other of what it was.
The one word I kept, or the phrase that I kept hearing is, we're paying to the standard.
Yeah.
Like the standard of pay in this area is this. So that's what we can pay.
Yeah.
And that didn't feel like a satisfactory answer. One of our core pieces of business is that we are raising the bar in what we're paying staff.
All right.
And I don't think it was that hard of a thing to do when you're doing it right off the get-go.
Yeah.
I certainly get that when you're a business that's in place for a long period of time, ramping up to that sort of pay quickly can be very difficult because you're already set in what you're paying. But from the get-go, it hasn't been hard to offer the pay that we're offering. And I feel like, for one, it has attracted staff to our business. It's attracted some very good staff, so we have a very fantastic team. But I also hope that spreads around the community. Even if we're not getting all the staff from the community, I hope that the staff are reaping the benefit of that at other places. I hope that they can see what we're paying our staff and hopefully try to meet that someday.
Yeah. And I think part of your perspective with it too is, not only, trying to set the standard or raise the standard from where it is too, but acknowledging this is what you are worth. And so, for example, we both know licensed technicians. So these are individuals that have gone to 2 years of schooling, have a professional degree, have a medical license, and some of them had to work 2 jobs in order to make a living wage. And we're like, for a professional, degreed one, that doesn't make sense to us. So, we're trying to do that, but also it's that paying what they're worth and showing that they're value in that way. And so not necessarily compensating for the long hours and the emotional tolls and things like that. It certainly helps, but just acknowledging that you have value beyond being a body in a room.
I guess I imagine from the veterinary side, there's certain things that that's just part of the job, right? You're going to be next to an animal, a loved one, a family member of some family that's going to pass.
Yeah.
And have to have that conversation. It's going to be difficult.
Yep.
You're going to have to talk with the family that can't necessarily afford to take care of their animal.
All the time.
You're going to have to lift a 80-pound dog, right? There's just certain things where you're like, we can make your life easier and better financially, but there's certain things that just part of the job that you can't navigate around. So I understand that. That's, I guess, I think of my staff, and there's many of my staff, I won't necessarily say all, but many of my staff I would love to pay more, and you pay, I guess I pay as much as I can, but that's, I don't know, I was told by someone, a business owner, and it made me think, just step back a moment, and they said, an employee wants to work at the job where they're going to be paid the most and work the least. An employer wants the worker to work the most, but they pay them the minimum amount because it's capitalism, right? We're trying to transfer money for transactions, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh, those are opposing ideals.
Yeah.
So that's not ideal, but I guess that's all part of the game, right? Because then that comes in, how do you price your service?
Right.
Do we price it higher or lower to our competition, or I guess going into the other stuff, how do we compare? Because we don't want to be commoditized. So we want to, like, what do we do better and what do we not necessarily do because whatever. So I don't know, it's a shell game.
Yeah.
a lot
Yes,
of it, so.
absolutely.
But no, that's great that you can pay more so you can attract presumably higher quality employees. I guess you don't know until they're actually on the job.
Yeah.
Right.
Employee-
And I will say, a lot of our staff, we did actually previously know. Like,
Oh, nice.
Like, I had worked with them like 5 years ago, or have crossed paths previously with them.
Okay,
or
so you're
I-
aware of their work.
Yeah.
ethic.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like I did, I spent a couple years doing relief work, which is basically substitute teacher, but for doctors, is the way that I describe it. And so, so several of them maybe I didn't work with them, consistently, but as I was at, other clinics here and there I got to know them a little bit and kind of
All right, so you never know who's watching,
Yeah.
right?
You never know. Yeah.
Cat might be starting a business and you're going to be called up, right?
When you put out those job applications,
Yeah.
you never quite know who's going to come for them.
Yeah.
Or Cat's and Lisa are going to start a business and you're not going to be called.
Yes. Well, it was actually interesting. It actually worked a little bit the other way around. Especially with me doing the relief stuff, is my goal with doing it was I'm going to get my name out there and my work, and so that you know and trust me, and then you would send your patients to me for that when something goes wrong. Because most day practices are just like, we're going to do the vaccines, we're going to do the blood work, we're just going to make sure everything's going good, but they don't often have time to take in of like, oh, you have been vomiting for 3 days. I don't have an open spot in my schedule for a week. Like, so those sorts of things. But
We answer phones for some clinics.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how they'll keep us up to date on whether they can or cannot take an emergency.
yeah.
And it was just a little bit of a mindset shift for me, because then I'll see these messages come through and I'm like, could a hospital do that? Like a human hospital? We're not taking any more emergencies. Maybe they do.
Yeah.
It's just a weird thing, like, I got a thing coming out of my head. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you're not taking emergencies?
They did do that during COVID.
All right.
Because they were they hit a point at which they were overwhelmed. And I've also worked at veterinary ERs where we got overwhelmed at some point and just had to, it was heartbreaking and depressing for us as staff to have to do that. But it did feel necessary at some points to actually, to preserve the quality of our medicine, to not see anything more.
Fair.
So it did happen, and
Alright.
it sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's usually referred to as diversion
Okay.
Yeah.
or
Diversion,
bypass or
okay.
things like that.
Yeah. So we're going on diversion to care for the cases that we're currently caring for.
All right.
So it means, basically it's the way of saying, like, we're not closed, we're still here and seeing what we have, but we can't take anything new, so we're going to direct you to a different place that can.
That's fair. That's reasonable, because you can only physically do so much.
Right.
And though you want to,
Yeah.
desire alone is not enough
Yeah.
to be able to take care of
So,
an
if
animal.
you have a team of 4 or 5 people and you have 25 cases hospitalized, that's going to take your entire night for them. So it's it sucks, and that's why we did what we did.
Fair.
Yeah.
Totally fair. So I guess perfect segue, right? So you guys are like, hey, we're not liking where we're at. We want to start our own thing. Well, let me back up a step here. Starting your own thing is a big undertaking, as you know, right?
Yeah.
What made you decide to take on something like that versus just shifting jobs?
There's nothing else like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the big thing. And so, prior to this, in most places, you have just your general care. So you have your day practices. This is where you go to see your vaccines. Maybe they can take 1 or 2, sick pets a day for them. But they're these doctors. Sure, they're not specialty trained or things like that, but they are really good at what they do for them. But they're limited. They're 8 to 5, 7 to 5. Whatever those day hours may be, which can put a lot of strain on the clients trying to figure out the schedules and work and things like that for them. And then you have your emergency and referral centers. And so your emergency centers are basically your human ERs. They're, walk in, first come, not first come, first serve. It's all triage and status based. But so, you can come in there for something that you think is urgent, but you're waiting 6 to 8 hours because it's an ear infection and not the hit by car, things like that. And so, and then there's those ones, but they're open 24 hours. And so they're constantly juggling all of this. Well, our model is we're urgent care. And so we're not open 24 hours. We open our doors at 5 p.m. And our goal is to only see the things that are in that middle of the road section. So that 3-day vomiting, diarrhea, the laceration that's, stable and running around like a goofball. From there, the ear infections, things like that don't truly need to go to the ER, just need a couple of hours in and out for them, but you don't want those waiting, 2 to 3 weeks to get in and see it. And so our thing it's how do we help fix some of this problem? How do we take pressure off of both sides so that they can see the things that need to be seen from them and what they're good at and they know how to do? And the answer is we're going to take those middle of the road cases. So our goal is we'll take these things that are, less critical, so that way if you guys can see the hit by cars, you can see the respiratory stress that need to be hospitalized and are in more critical condition. Obviously, we're going to triage, something and stabilize something if it comes in our door. We're the closest to them. But taking some of that pressure off of both sides is going to help improve access to care for everybody.
Yep.
All right.
And there are some urgent cares in the Milwaukee area, but that was neither desirable to drive to and not close enough to Madison to make a difference here. So
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
No, it's a huge market. Just about everyone I know has pets.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, like I didn't grow up with a dog, but I have a dog now and she's incredible. And it's interesting, I suppose, you just see what you know. So you're walking along, and I remember running through my neighborhood, and I'm like, they have a pet, they have a pet, they have a pet, they have a pet. And just running through the numbers of the percentage of people that have pets, I'm like, okay, that percentage of people, that's your market. And then how many veterinary clinics are needed to sustain that.
yeah.
So it's crazy numbers.
It was so part of our business planning in the company that we worked with we do demographic surveys, and so we did both demographics for what other competitor market is in there, in the 5 mile and the 10 mile radius, and then also what is the client base of there, what are the age populations, how many of them generally have pets and things like that. And I don't remember the specific numbers of anything off the top of my head anymore, and we did do that for a couple of different locations, but it was just fascinating to see okay, this is, Sun Prairie is a great example because it is very much an up and coming, kind of
growing fast
community of, and so there's a lot of that, untapped potential in the markets. And our closest sick care facility is going to be 20 minutes away on a good day. So and sometimes
not counting the wait. That's just to get there.
Yeah.
Yes, that's just drive time. That's
door,
just drive time, which 20 minutes sometimes can be a lot.
Totally.
For some of these sick things. So expanding that access to care, finding the right areas and things like that is definitely a part of our decision making.
Fair.
Yep.
You guys also do oncology.
We do.
We don't,
Okay.
but we have an oncologist
Or
with us.
the business itself offers it.
Yes.
Tell me how you decided to offer that.
Yeah. Well, so that was
A little bit serendipitous.
Dr. Brandsummer is her name, and we had known, we used to work with her a few years ago, and she left to go practice in the Milwaukee area. But we had found that she was still commuting an hour to get there every single day. And so we reached out and asked if she wanted to return to the Madison area. And so that, was just kind of remember this person exists and see if, so it was kind of cool that she, of course she wanted to practice in Madison still. She was commuting that far.
All right.
Yeah.
So.
And is there competition in that realm?
Yes. So
Is there much competition in that realm?
yes and
Yes and no.
yeah.
Okay.
So I think all the other big emergency practices in the area have an oncologist or an oncology service.
Okay.
But right now, I think they're booking out 1 to 2 weeks, even for really sick cases.
Wow.
Whereas we, of course, it's because we're new at the moment, but we can get those cases in within a day or two. So yes, there is competition, but there's so many cases right now that need help.
Yeah. And the fascinating thing too is, and we saw this really well during the pandemic, is for emergency medicine and specialty care medicine in the veterinary field is it's not generally a competitive market. And
Okay.
so we, during the pandemic in South Central, Milwaukee area, even the Chicago area, for the ERs, we had a shared spreadsheet between all of the clinics, I said from Chicago to Madison, that we kept updated of this is what our wait time is, do we have the availability for surgeries, can we accommodate this? And so we would constantly shunt cases back and forth of like, hey,
We can't
we
handle
can't
this,
handle
but
this
can
right
you?
now, but this clinic can. Yeah, they're going to be a little bit farther away, but they can take you for them. And there was a lot of that. So there's a lot of case sharing and figuring out where these patients needed to go to get care.
And
for
even
them.
now we're seeing other clinics, like other ERs call us saying, hey, can you take this patient because we're overworked at the moment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so we've had a couple that are like, hey, we've done our exam, things like that. They need X procedure, X surgery. We just don't have the ability to take the time to go into a 2-hour procedure right now. Can you accommodate that tonight? Or cost-wise of, ERs are going to be more expensive. Part of our goal too, being that middle of care, is being a little bit less expensive than an ER. As urgent care, it's going to cost a little bit more than your GP, but also improving financial access to care too. And so that's been part of that as well.
All right. Interesting. Tell me, I'm curious about the oncology thing and the
Absolutely.
urgent care stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that and the equipment that you need for oncology, I imagine, is different or in addition to.
Only
In
a
addition
little bit.
to,
Yeah.
we did have to do that. So when we did our building and our build out, we did have to create a section specifically for oncology, particularly in terms of the chemotherapy medications, because those are excessively hazardous drugs. And so, we did have to design into it's called a prep and administration area. So these are 2 separate rooms. There's a lot of
HVAC.
physics that goes into them. Basically, there's a positive pressure and a negative pressure room. So what it is so their main treatment area is positive pressure, so it has increased airflow, so that when they open the door into the prep area, which is negative pressure, it pushes the air into it, which is where the chemotherapy hood, so we see in like science and chemistry classes and things like that in there for them, which is what has the fans that vents everything out of the building. And so by having that pressure difference, it keeps the fumes from any of those medications being drawn up in their open vials from going out to anywhere else into the clinic.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a pretty complex system, and I don't pretend to understand it any more than that. But so that was one of the things that we had to focus on and figure out, okay, this is what they need specifically to do this in the safest manner for pets, patients, and staff.
So you're talking independent HVAC system, filtration, pressure differential for that section of the building.
It's all isolated lines, so it doesn't connect to any of the rest of the hospital.
Yeah.
things like that.
And the hard thing is there's no like set standard. There's guidelines, but there's no like set standard for how you set up a veterinary oncology area.
So how many kilopascals in this room or
Right.
anything
Yeah.
like that? Okay.
Yeah, I think there's it's the guideline called the USP 800 or something like that. And I think someday it may become like true standard, but for now it's just technically a guideline.
These are what
Which is weird.
recommendations are, but we don't have any way to enforce them, basically.
Right. And it's really weird when that comes to like your staff safety. These people, like these drugs could cause serious harm if you do it the wrong way. And so we wanted to make sure from the get-go that we were doing it as up to standard as possible.
Yeah.
So I have to apologize because I'm ignorant when it comes to chemotherapy and stuff like that. In my head, there was some fancy ray gun that was like chemotherapy or something like that, like an X-ray machine. And then I learned through a little bit of studying and my dog being diagnosed, or having a tumor, I should say, that it's drugs, essentially, injections and stuff like this.
There's a lot of different forms.
Okay.
So you're
So
thinking
can
of
you
radiation
elaborate?
therapy.
Okay, can
versus
you elaborate on all that?
Well, what you're thinking of, radiation therapy does exist.
Okay.
So you have dogs, not at our facility, but UW has radiation therapy. You image the pet, you find out where exactly where is the issue, and then they do like focused radiation and target a specific area. What we provide is chemical chemotherapy. So we're giving injectables, oral medications that are meant to systemically target a cancer. So, yeah.
And the easiest way that is probably not as accurate as some physicists would like me to be is that radiation therapy is best compared to a laser.
Okay.
Like using a laser
Very
pointer.
focused.
Yeah, it's very focused and it is a directed beam of energy, whereas the chemotherapy medications is, like I said, it's a liquid or a pill that we're physically giving to them that then affects the whole body and not just the area.
Okay.
for 'em.
And these are giving off enough fumes that
They
in
can.
that area, or they can give off enough fumes that it's that, wow.
Yeah, and they still need to, even if they're chemotherapy, if it's in their internal system, they still need to be treated as if they are contaminated for that. So, making sure that we're wearing gloves with them, picking up their waste and things like that, because the medication is excreted in the waste and
What
things
goes
like
in
that.
goes out, right?
Exactly, and
Yeah.
so that all then becomes hazardous waste as well.
Oh,
So
interesting.
There's
Yeah.
so much that goes into oncology.
yeah, it's a lot of chemistry and physics that my brain cannot process.
I suppose it's years of school, and we're trying to wrap up
Yes.
in 30 seconds here, so I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah, it's an additional 4 years on top of what we already do.
Oh, interesting.
So-
Wow.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
when you become a veterinary specialist, you have to go through at least 3, sometimes 4 years of
Internships
internship and
residency.
residency. So you're specifically practicing in that area for several other years.
So you're talking a decade plus
Yes.
of college.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yep. Which is technically still less than a human doctor, but
All right.
yeah,
yeah.
I'm just thinking that sounds expensive, but
yes.
yes, it
Yeah.
totally is.
I think I don't know if this is accurate because I haven't seen the last couple of years come out, but I think on average a couple of years ago, most veterinarians graduate with an average about $200,000 in debt.
That's
Yeah.
I've seen that statistic. Yeah, it's a healthy nut.
Yeah.
So,
It's I get it.
yep.
Tell me a story about the equipment.
Yeah.
Because, well, let me back up a step. You built your building. Let's talk about the design of the building.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a big empty box.
Yep.
How did you figure out where you're going to put stuff, how big it's going to be, location, all that jazz?
A combination of different things. The biggest probably being of experience from all the other clinics that we've worked in. And so, we've both worked in a background of other clinics and we've seen their flow and where the sticking points are and things like that for them. Also, medicine is evolving over time. And so, a lot of day practices are, the office and treatment area in the back are maybe this size or half this size of the space in terms of what they have in the back room, and most of their building space is dedicated to exam rooms for that. For specialty care or emergency type medicine, the inverse is true. And so we dedicate a lot less space to exam rooms because a lot of our stuff that we're doing is we're doing procedures and imaging and treatment and using all of that equipment in the back for the care of the pet. And so it was figuring out that, and then there was a lot of figuring out, okay, what equipment do we need? Does this equipment need its own space? Can it share space? How much space do we need to house pets while they're here for them? What does our flow look like? So do we have, exam rooms with just one door and we both, doctors and clients have to come in and out of the same door and share the same space? Do we have 2 doors? If we have 2 doors, do we have the back door going straight into the treatment area? Do we have a hallway or a wall in between that? What does that flow move in look like? And so
And so much is like Kat said, so much has been influenced by working in a clinic and realizing, oh, I want this a different way than what I see it currently.
or hey, I really liked that flow. That worked really well. And then in terms of square foot size, imprint space of,
That was a little bit of a
we didn't
I guess
quite know how
Yeah.
because it's visualizing what 3 square feet is versus 4,000 square feet is. You don't have a mental map of
No,
what that
it's
is.
so funny you say that. I'll just tangent
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
real quick. So I have this office for rent. It's 121 square feet.
Yeah.
121. So basically 12 by 10.
Yeah.
And I had someone reach out to me and ask if they could run a doggy daycare there. And I'm like, 1, it's indoors. 2, 121 square feet?
Yeah.
Are you taking care of a sick pet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
any dog that wants to run around is going to need way more space than that. But it just helped me understand,
Yeah.
oh, you have no idea what that number
Yeah.
means. You
Yeah.
just saw it, it's cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're looking at plans on paper, it's way different in person.
All right,
Yeah.
Fair. It was two-dimensional, I imagine.
Yes.
Your overhead.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and it also looked way different. Like when we walked in our building, and it was just metal studs, but you could see like the floor started to get mapped out but you could see all the way through the clinic. We're like, oh gosh, this is really small.
Yeah.
And then when they actually put the walls in, and you couldn't see all the way through the clinic anymore, then it started to feel like, oh yeah, we can
It's
actually
an
exist here.
interesting perception bias of you have an empty box or an empty box with walls that you can see through, and that you're like, oh, this looks really small, and then putting physical drywall where you can't see everything, you putting more stuff in the space makes it bigger.
Fair.
And my brain doesn't know how to comprehend that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so figuring out the space there was good, and I think for what we want to do, ideally, we're probably still on the smaller side. Because especially with oncology, we would have liked to have, CT on site and things like that, but we just didn't have that space. But it is bigger than what we were initially getting. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Tell me, if you don't mind, why did you choose to build new versus just finding some building and doing a build out?
Yeah,
We tried
to find a building.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Most of the places that we were getting were around 3 to 3,500 square feet.
They were old restaurants that would need to be converted, which is fine, but shockingly a large number of vet clinics are that way. But that's also would have been one of, they would have had to have been full gets, and so the renovation and demolition costs increased the cost of the construction, and we actually ended up getting really lucky because it was like a year and a half process of finding a location.
Yeah.
Which is
We were actually going to get the McDonald's on Sun Prairie Main Street.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, by
Yeah.
the grocery store.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
And that was actually a rather large building. There was just some corporate stuff that ultimately kind of stymied that.
Corporate, McDonald's corporate?
And Kroger corporate. Like
Oh.
just some
Yeah.
weird stuff because they're right next to each other.
Oh,
They
interesting.
wouldn't allow a vet clinic in that area for some reason. But
Bizarre.
yeah.
which is
fine.
there's, and it's we
was
could have
fi-
made it work if we really needed to, but we ended up
Honestly,
finding where we were.
Yeah,
So
things worked for the better. Like we're in a fantastic
Closer to the highway?
yeah,
Exactly.
closer to the highway there.
Practical.
Yep.
It is a brand new construction building, and so we got in contact with the developer, Kramer Development, and they've worked with veterinary projects before, so they were really excited to have another veterinary clinic come in. We've been excited to work with them, and like I said, they actually increased the square footage footprint of the original design specifically to help accommodate us.
Yeah,
and there, which
they
is amazing.
extended the project by a few months just to help us get a little more square footage.
Oh, very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so
Very cool.
it's been great. So we were able to start from ground up, which is awesome.
Yeah,
Nice.
just to be able to have everything exactly how you want it, and not have to necessarily go off of a previous floor plan.
All right.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to work with the city to get approval and stuff like that? Or
Not from our
No.
perspective, no.
Okay.
Or maybe we chose the right people to do that.
Oh,
for us.
really?
Yeah.
Maybe that was Kramer's problem.
Yeah, but
The building's up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our builder, design builder, Keller, fantastic. They're so good at taking the ideas that you have and putting it on paper. They're the real reason we have everything the way we have it in our building. So they were able to take our what's the workflow that we wanted? How do we want people to move through this building? And they put it on paper, and it was a great plan.
yeah, do we have specific areas that need to be in specific locations on the building, or do we have specific rooms that need to be next to each other, that sort of thing, and then they played puzzle with it and made it work.
Nice.
Even so far as 7, 10, 15 years down the line,
Yeah.
if you're going to expand, where do we want these rooms to
Yeah.
easily expand
Yeah.
out?
Very
So,
cool. So
yeah.
looking
Yeah.
towards the future there.
Yeah.
Tell me a story, because we got
Yeah.
to, right? New building, equipment,
Yeah.
all that, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Costs money.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it tough to get financing?
It wasn't necessarily tough
Not
to
as-
get
Maybe
approved
tough is the
for.
wrong question, right?
It was interesting to try and figure out what our budget needed to be, and then
Yes.
also to figure out, did we need one bank or two and then which bank to choose. So we ended up working with a group called Live Oak Bank, and they do I don't think they're exclusively veterinary.
No, but
for their-
veterinary
they are-
is their second top lending group that they.
This is a national bank?
Yep, it's a
Okay.
national bank, and they have a specific small business or SBA loan program that they do, and so working with them, we were able to finance the entire project. Where if we had gone with other banks, we would have had to do 2 separate loans or finance a good portion of it ourselves.
Okay.
Just because of the margins that the other banks were offering was about half of the their cap was about half of what we actually needed.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay. How did you find Live Oak Bank then?
Through a consultant group that we've been working with.
Yeah,
Okay.
Blue Heron is the consulting group, and they're veterinary specific. Safe to say this project would not exist without them.
Very much
Really?
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Blue Heron Consulting is they're a group specifically helping veterinarians open their own practices. So it's a lot of the consultants are veterinarians or veterinary practice managers, adjacent for them, and their whole goal is to say, okay, these are the steps that you guys need to. This is how we do our business proposal. This is how we do our projections. Here's a bunch of contacts that we have. Go for it here.
How did you find Blue Heron then?
I actually found them through school. So in my school at Washington State University, we had a program called the Diagnostic Challenge, which is basically there's a week where you and a group of team you work through a case, in a group setting and kind of learn and figure out how it goes and make mistakes. And so we have client actors for them. One of my client actors was the founder of Blue Heron Consulting, and so yeah, small world. And so reached out to him, started talking that way, and got in contact that way. So
Nice.
yeah,
But yeah, they've been integral. They introduced us to so many contacts. It's definitely the reason that we got through this.
So this is interesting because a lot of small business owners that I meet have this, I'm going to call it not necessarily the right mentality, but it's mentality that they know how to do it all.
Sure.
They're good at whatever it is that they do. And they're just like, I do this thing. Let's see, I'm a painter, right? I paint. I got my truck, my brush, my bucket, and I'm going to be a painter. I charge people, they pay me, rinse, repeat, right? I got this business thing figured out. And they don't want to reach out to a consultant or even another painter that's been through the ringer and knows the mistakes that they're going to make or things like that. You guys had the foresight to actually reach out to a consultant.
I knew nothing about business,
Yeah.
and all I knew is that we wanted a business, and I had no idea how to get there.
yeah.
All right.
And I think we could have ended up figuring it out on our own.
Add a few years onto it, though.
But it
A few
would
$100,000.
we'd probably only be about halfway to where we are
Yeah.
right
All right.
now. So, it's been awesome to do. And not, I'm sure other small business owners that can do it on their own can do well with that. I don't necessarily think that's the right choice, especially for something as involved as a vet clinic, because there are so many parts and pieces to it, and and not just we're doing this in here too, but liability and all of that, workplace safety, things like that. There too there's just so much to think about.
I mean,
Yeah.
our equipment budget alone was $500,000, and like we're buying things like ultrasounds and
Endoscopes,
and even like the little intraocular pressure,
Yeah.
the Tonovet, the thing that you measure pressures with the eye, $3,500.
Yeah.
Those little things all add up.
Yeah. Sounds like big things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the eye pressure is probably a thing only about this big, but
I don't even know what that does, but
it's a little like actually it's probably the same one that you use if you go to the eye doctor. If they come up there, it's a little like F-shaped like trigger, for the want of a better word. They put it here in front of your eye, and it has this little like pinpoint of like, it looks like a sewing pin that just comes out and taps the surface of your eye.
Huh.
Yeah. Detects like glaucoma, for example.
All right. So I teach business planning class, and this woman was starting a coffee shop, and she told me the price of her Italian coffee making thing, and it was just one of those things where you're like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in that, like, this is the profession,
Yeah.
this is the top of the line, this is what it costs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, compared to a Mr. Coffee, that's a couple bucks more.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't a Mr. Coffee.
Yeah.
This is professional line.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
whatever. I don't know if they have an amateur version of that high pressure
they do.
thing?
They do. There's
Okay.
It's closer to like 1,500, I think.
Yeah.
That's still
but
a lot of money.
It's
Yeah.
still a lot,
Alright.
but when you're starting a new business, you kind of know you have your list of equipment that you need to operate, and you have your list of things that you know need to be a specific brand or a specific quality, and then you have things that you can compromise on.
Fair.
Yeah, and that's just how you have to be. And there's also some things you put on a wish list that you don't need right at the start, but would love to get a year or two
Sure,
out.
down the line. Makes
Exactly.
sense.
Like for example, we knew we weren't going to have CT, so we got a top of the line ultrasound.
All right.
It's 105,000 though, which doesn't
That's a
actually. I
healthy
guess
nut.
it's a healthy, but that's going to be one of our highest
butter,
imaging
yeah.
modalities, and it had to be good because we knew we weren't going to have that next step up with the CT.
It's one of those things, I suppose, if you cheap out on it, it's actually
Yeah.
going to cost you more money in the end.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
yeah, you got a $500 car, but it broke
Yeah.
down on the way to work, so
Yes.
now you're out of a job. Like,
Yeah.
oh.
Well, another interesting one to think about that probably most places don't think about is laundry units.
Oh.
So we ended up looking into and getting the more expensive, like industrial, like these go in a laundromat style washer and dryer, instead of many other clinics will use, home commercial ones.
Okay.
But then they're also trying to do 3 to 5 loads like in a 3-hour period, and those aren't designed for that.
No.
For them. And so, sometimes they find out with those ones of like, oh, they break down or have to be replaced so often. We're like, it's a lot. It kind of hurts, but we're going to do this now because we know we're going to be doing high soiled, high volume.
This reminds me of way back when I fixed printers. And I was fixing this fax machine for a local news station. And they had this $50 Brother fax machine. This is a long time ago, right? Fax machines were a thing back then. that brought in their AP news stories. So they called us in this crisis. It was 5 o'clock on a Friday, and they needed that machine working for the news at 6. And I'm like, this is that big of a deal? And you're relying on the $60 Office Depot special for this?
Yeah.
Why didn't you buy 2?
Yeah.
It was just one of those bizarre things. Like, you're relying all on this little tiny kind of piece of junk supposed to be made for the home that you use once a year thing. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, that's where you saved money?
Right.
After all this?
Yeah.
Yep.
It was crazy. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I want to ask you really quick about the partnership. You guys have been together. You went through putting together a building.
Yep.
I mean, people have remodeled houses and got divorces, so there's that. You started a business, figured out how you're going to spend many dollars. You got essentially pretty deep in debt, I imagine, together, so that's a challenge. Now you're talking about hiring employees that you have to agree on the people there.
Yep.
How do you guys do it?
Well, I will say, I know we worked together previously at the same job. We were also co-ER directors at that job as well.
Oh, okay.
For like a year and a half or so. But we kind of learned each other's like style for how they manage a group of people. And we also realized we do it very differently in very complementary ways.
Yeah. And so, like, one of the big ones there is I tend to be very people focused and driven. And so, like, okay, we need to make sure that we have, we're respecting boundaries and getting people out of here, following their time, listening to them. And she's very process oriented. And so it's like, okay, well, yeah, we can do that, but what about this? So, like, what about our production numbers or this side of things here? And so that perspective of just trying to be like, okay, this is how we talk about it. Or when we talk about hiring people, of we're looking at different qualities for their, and it's not something we have to tell ourselves to do. It's almost an innate of what we pick up on is different than some people. And so, I pick up on the needs of, talking to people. I was like, oh yeah, they're going to talk about, this, they're really motivated about teaching and things like that. And she's like, they're going to focus on, they're going to be that detail oriented. They're going to do focus here on this and things like that. And so we pick up on the qualities or lack thereof of just in different perspectives, and it has ended up working for many years now. So
Very cool.
Yeah. So while we're very different people in that sense, it's a great business.
Yeah.
Makes a great business.
Yeah.
Very cool. Tell me, what have been some of the challenges that you didn't necessarily know were going to happen? I mean, you guys have been open
But
just
just
about
over
a
a
a
month.
month. Okay.
Yeah.
So you probably found some things where you're like, ooh, didn't see that one coming.
Well,
printer ink.
yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
We haven't figured out our order, like how quickly we go through printer ink. So I think we've been out of color toner for about a week now.
All right.
So we're just
We can
trying
talk
to get
about
back
that after
in.
the show.
Yeah.
I'll help you with
Yeah.
that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's give you some guidance.
Yeah.
There, but
So that's been the one on my brain
Yeah.
lately.
that's so funny.
Yeah.
You did all this. And printer ink is the big thing. That's small potatoes.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
You're good.
absolutely.
Not holding us up at least, but like
Right.
just, the weird things that
Yeah.
the small weird things that you encounter.
All right.
A bigger thing has probably been learning to relax.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
like we spent the whole last, how long has it been? At least
2.5 years.
2.5 years
Yeah.
since we started this issue, or started this project.
Yeah.
And I just now can finally feel like I can go
Yeah.
home and just be at home.
Yeah.
Like I don't, I know I have things to do, but I can just put it behind me for a night. And that I haven't felt that in 2.5 years.
Wow.
Like there's
Yeah.
always something like, I got this thing to do.
Yeah.
I can just go to my computer and just work on it. I'm home, I can do it. But now I can actually be at home.
Or the juggling of like, I'm at home, but am I on call for something? So, because, as a business owner, for that, you are always on call,
Yeah, you
basically.
punch in once and you don't get to punch out for a very
and
long
so
time.
so it's there's things that are always coming up, and it's much less of on call of like, oh, do you need to come in for surgery or things like that. Cases, it's the things like the printer ink, or I can't find this in the computer, but I know it exists. Those sorts of things, or hey, I don't think I have permission for this, but I think I should. Those sorts of things, and which is nice because we use cloud-based software programs, so we can access that and update those anywhere that we need to. But it's just those ones of like, okay, how do we get there? And our staff has been really good about, they're like, I'm sorry to keep bugging you, but we're trying to be self-sufficient. And I was like, it's been a month. You don't have to be self-sufficient yet. It's okay.
You can endorse it. It's
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah. So-
Be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
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 What have been some of the things that went better than you expected?
Better than expected.
Yeah.
I think getting cases in the door has ramped up quicker than expected. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's just been a really cool thing to see the community send cases our way already.
Nice.
Even
By community, do you mean other clinics?
other clinics, yes.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
where a
Impressive.
majority of our cases are coming from.
Yeah, at least
So-
like 60 or 70% of cases I think are getting referred from primary vets.
All right.
And even to the point where like on a slower oncology day, for example, we've sent our Dr. Summer out to do some clinic visits. And even that day, they'll send cases.
Yeah.
Like they'll just like, oh, they're fresh in our mind.
Yeah.
Let's send you a case. Even to the point where like, I offer like full abdominal ultrasounds and diagnostic echocardiograms, which I think is a huge asset to this community. And
It's an ultrasound of the heart, by the way.
yes, yep. And a clinic thought to send me to refer me an echocardiogram case, and that's a really cool thing to have happen so soon after opening.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. We got to wrap up here, but
Yeah,
really quick, where are you located?
We're just not quite Sun Prairie, but we are on American Parkway in the American Center. So our address is 5458 Buttonwood Drive. We're just across from the Quick Trip and next to Caribou.
So that is Madison?
It is technically
Technically.
Madison.
It is?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
It doesn't feel like it. It feels like Sun Prairie, but it is technically Madison.
Yeah, I think we're only one field apart from Sun Prairie.
All right. I would have guessed Sun Prairie, but I guess that makes sense. That makes sense. So essentially very close to the intersection of the interstate and Highway 151.
Yep.
Very cool. How about a website?
ACESvetmed.com.
All right.
Yeah.
ACESvetmed.com. Easy enough. This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. If you're watching or listening to this on the web, which you probably are, you can do us a huge favor. Give it a big old thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, share it with your entrepreneurial friends, especially those friends that probably have some pets. Because Lisa and Kat are the ones that are going to help them.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
I don't know. You want them to help, but on the flip side, it's urgent care, so maybe you don't want that. I don't know.
My usual ending is, it was great to meet you, but I don't want to see you again.
Fair. I like that. I like that. That's better. We'd like to thank your wonderful listeners as well as our guests, Kat and Lisa of ACES Veterinary. Can you remind us, what does ACES stand for again?
Animal Center for Emergency and Specialty.
Awesome. And then the website again.
ACESvetmed.com.
Awesome. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.